weeks. But we're here tonight to talk about the Green New Deal. We're so glad that you're all here. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to introduce our guest for tonight. Our guest, before I do that, actually, let me just back up 1 second and offer that we wanted to do this. This was important for us to do as an organization because the Green New Deal is a phrase that you've likely heard a lot in public discourse over the last 2 years. It was fiercely debated in the last presidential election. Versions of the Green New Deal embraced at various levels by most Democratic candidates. President Trump, on the other hand, derided, even mocked the concept. And the Republican Party is likely to run against the phrase in the upcoming elections. While a large portion of the country doesn't think it goes far enough yet, perhaps an equally large portion considers it socialism or communism, or maybe worse. But few of us actually understand the Green New Deal. Everyone has opinions, but too few of us have this precious commodity called information. So unfortunately, the Green New Deal, along with climate change, has fallen into the crevice between the two parties. And if we're ever going to solve climate change, we need two political parties to focus together on a wide range of solutions, if that's possible. And while the Green New Deal may mean one thing nationwide, what does it mean to Philadelphia? What does it mean to Pennsylvania? So as a Center for Environmental Education, we're hoping to begin to fill in the information gap, to have you learn as much as you can about the Green New Deal and allow you to come to your own conclusions about what it is and is not. Joining us tonight to help fill the information deficit is Pennsylvania State Senator Nikil Saval, elected in 2020 to his first term representing Center City's State Senate District 1, running explicitly on a Green New Deal platform. A resident of South Philly, he's been a labor organizer and is a co-founder of Reclaim Philadelphia, a progressive group that works for racial, economic, and gender justice. A writer, he has written for both the New York Times and New Yorker, and his book Cubed, The Secret History of the Workplace, examines the long-term evolution of the workplace. The son of immigrants from India who opened a pizzeria in the 1980s, Senator Saval himself is the father of two boys. Our second guest will be State Representative Elizabeth Fiedler, who could not be here for the opening. She'll be joining us in a few moments, and I'll introduce her when she arrives. Welcome, Senator Saval. So happy you're with us.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you to the Schuylkill Center for hosting this. It's and just a moving series of opening images of children and squirrels, and I'm excited to visit the center as you and. I have a lot to learn, but I'm excited to be here.
And we have a nature preschool, and you have kids who need preschool soon, so.
That's correct, yeah.
But you'd like an opening statement to offer us, correct?
Sure, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to speak and look forward to everyone's questions, and also look forward to being joined by my friend and colleague, Representative Feedler, from whom I've learned a lot about these topics. So, I'm very glad for the invitation to talk about the Green New Deal with you and with Rep. Fiedler. So again, my district is the first senatorial district, which runs from Kensington and Port Richmond at the northern end to the airport in Eastwick at the southern end. And its eastern border is the Delaware River, and along the west, it's bounded by the Schuylkill around Fairmount and into Center City, and it crosses over that river into Southwest Philadelphia. And of course, I want to acknowledge that this district, as with all of Philadelphia, exists on land belonging originally to the Lenni Lenape people. When I talk about the Green New Deal, I actually like to point out that I acknowledge that I come relatively late to the environmental justice movement. I would imagine later than many of the people on this call. My background and experience have been as a writer, a journalist. I write principally about architecture and design, and as a labor organizer. And so climate change is something that I was certainly aware of, believed was happening, believed was created by human beings, ardently believed that we should stop it. But in a way, the kind of framework for changing the picture, or what frankly bleak environmental picture, was I would say the Green New Deal. When I first heard about the concept, I realized that frankly, what it changed for me was that it would mean real and concrete systemic change in our infrastructure, and in particular things like our schools and housing. So I organized with Unite Here, which are a labor union which represents hospitality workers. But one of the groups that they represent is the school district of Philadelphia, cafeteria workers, and what used to be called noontime aides, kind of student safety staff. And I in that context, I became very close to what I consider an environmental crisis in our schools, with our toxic schools, with unremediated lead, exposed asbestos, poor to non-existent ventilation. I've long had an interest in architecture and how cities could be built to match the needs and lives of those inhabiting them. And so I realized that a Green New Deal, when it was posed to me, or when it was proposed, or kind of made clear to me what it meant, would mean looking for the intersections of the major crises of our time: the climate crisis, the housing crisis, school inequity, racial and income inequality, mass incarceration, to name just a few, to find the most effective solutions. And so I campaigned on a platform that included, and in fact kind of centered, a Green New Deal for the state of Pennsylvania. And together with policy experts who work on Green New Deal issues actually at a national level as well as a local level, many of whom are, I will just note, centered at the University of Pennsylvania, my campaign team crafted a platform that centered infrastructure changes as part of a plan for an overall transformation in our system of energy. And, as a worker, as a parent of two very young children, as you noted, a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old, and as a person watching the increased frequency of extreme weather events in our communities, our country, and, what our world is experiencing, a Green New Deal is just personally important to me. And as a legislator, I know that many of my constituents live in areas in which there is increased flooding, as there is in Eastwick, and in areas where there are heat islands where the temperature spikes, many, many degrees above average temperatures. I know that many of my constituents are simultaneously experiencing housing insecurity, spurred on by unemployment and wage stagnation. And I know that disproportionately these hardships are borne by my constituents who are Black and brown and who are poor. And my work on their behalf and on all of our behalf is guided by the realities of climate change, environmental crisis, and the hope embedded in a Green New Deal if this work is to make lasting change. And I'm glad to talk about these issues and everything I've raised here, and any kind of questions that you have, Mike, and the audience may have.
That's great. Thank you. So essentially, to simplify things, it's almost like we've taken the New Deal from the 1940s and a lot of it, what it represented, and added this green climate change overlay. Is that too simplifying, or does that begin to help people understand the phrase Green New Deal?
No, I think that's, it is at once a simple proposal that has many complex effects, let's say, and so I think that is a helpful framework. The initial impulse of the original New Deal was, we had an economic crisis that was immediate. We had the Wall Street crash and its effects, but of course that had roots that in the nature of the American economy. So there was both an attempt to transform the economy, in particular for workers and working class people, and do so in a lasting way, and to do so on in so many different ways, from frankly our arts, cultural work was a big part of the Green New Deal, to our infrastructure like the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, to just the construction of broad public goods, beaches, courthouses, what have you. And so I think that impulse is at the heart of the Green New Deal as well. How is this going to, we see the effects of the original New Deal everywhere. Basically, there was a courthouse built in all but 3 counties in the United States. We see those, just for example, it's a massive infrastructure building project. That is the impulse behind the Green New Deal, in the sense that we will see these changes in our lives, and our lives will be made measurably better by it. The fact that we have major energy burdens borne by our lowest income residents in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, across the country. For example, in Philadelphia, low-income residents can expect to pay around 23% of their income on utility payments. That doesn't even include rent, right? That's a huge amount. And so how can we reduce the energy burden for people? How can we weatherize their homes? How can we make them efficient, while at the same time reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which account for an enormous proportion. Residential emissions account for an enormous portion of overall greenhouse gas emissions. That will be a measurable change in people's lives. I think that climate change is one of these things, and it was true for me, honestly, that felt distant, that felt abstract to some degree. I mean, it doesn't, even though you experience these extreme weather events, but the fact that it comes from within, it's in our homes, it's all around us. We're contributing to it. Our houses are contributing to it. Our schools are, and that this is connected to basic inequalities in our society, and we have to attack all these things at once. I think that's what is at the heart of the Green New Deal, and that attack at fundamental inequalities was at the heart of the original New Deal. So I think it's a fair argument.
We have one question, which I'll get to in a second, but just want to continue to invite our viewers to put questions in chat, which I can ask of the senator. So I was really intrigued to read about you and that you were running on a Green New Deal as your platform, and you won. And for me, that was really extraordinary thing to see. But I'm curious, as you talk to voters, there must have been a range of opinions about the fact that that's what you were running on, from, oh my God, that's great, to, oh my God, how can you? So I'm curious about the reactions of people to running on a Green New Deal platform, and what misunderstandings most of us bring to what a Green New Deal is and isn't.
I would say that so from my own experience, I would say that my experience was, obviously it was successful to that. So in that sense, a pleasant, it was largely well received. But you're right that there are some confusions. And so my personal experience was that people understood, the Green New Deal was I was running in 2020. At least as a national proposal. It was introduced in 2019, by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ed Markey in the Senate, and it was seen as a national kind of proposal. So people wondered, what did that mean at a Pennsylvania level? And so clarifying what that meant, and we can get into that here, but part of that was just noting our state's outsized contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. Fully 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions are created by Pennsylvania. We don't have 1% of the world's population, but we punch above our weight on greenhouse gas emissions. The role of extractive economies, obviously, in our state is enormous.
Yeah.
And so that, the fact that we have to start here and every state needs to contribute, Pennsylvania is a big part of it. The other thing that we had to combat, and then getting into the details of it, that it involves our housing, it involves that I ran on a Green New Deal for schools, that involves these things that you see in daily life. And the other thing that I thought was important was that I think people think of it, many people, I would say, as largely as a kind of fantasy, when actually it was proposed nationally. I believe that Speaker Pelosi, sort of derisively referred to it as the green dream, or what you call it. Which captures a little bit of the sense that it is this dreamy proposal, supposedly, but in fact, it's meant to be as kind of nitty gritty as you can imagine. The fact is that it is very possible, it is necessary, and part of its possibilities embodied in the fact that it will involve basic changes in our transit, our housing, our schools, our public infrastructure, and residential infrastructure altogether. How we commute, how we get around, all of those things would change, in addition to massive investments in renewable energy on the kind of supply side. And so I would say that it was people just wanted to hear what it entailed, and of course, and I'm sure we can talk about this, just what possibilities of it in Pennsylvania.
I do want to do, but what's the Philly connection? What's the Pennsylvania? But first, let me get the first question that comes to you is there any lobby effort at the state level to tackle renewable energy? And while you answer that, also, there's a certain, how quickly Pennsylvania transitions to renewable is also really important. So let's focus on maybe the energy for a moment, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are multiple different efforts at the state level, in the state legislature, to move to a 100%, a significantly higher level of renewables. There's a target of 100% by 2050. I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation. I mean, though frankly, I think we could be more ambitious, but there are a number of different efforts to increase. We have alternative energy portfolio standards, which mandate a certain percentage of utility generation of coming from renewables. Ours are quite low. We need to those portfolio standards flatline in May of this year. So there's an effort to update those standards and include more solar and wind and stuff in those efforts. So there's a lot of state work there on a kind of bipartisan level. There's some interest in carbon capture and sequestration technology about which we can discuss. But so there is a lot of work. I mean, a lot of what my interest is I mean, I'm obviously very interested in it. Is what I would say is the demand side for it. And so looking at the fact that we have gas hookups in most of our homes, and there are proposals. California started to adopt them to ban natural gas hookups in new construction, to start to change how to mandate to electrification of our housing, because we need to stop consuming the product as well as extracting it. So can we make our homes more energy efficient? Can we weatherize them? Can we do deep retrofits? Connect them to solar, have solar on our roofs, things like that, where we start to change the energy picture in our, especially in cities like Philadelphia. 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from our house, come from residences and things like that. So it's just because we're not extracting here. It's really, we're not industrial. It's probably largely coming from our cities. So that's where I start to think about our changes. So, overall, there is an effort to tackle renewable energy. We need more. We need a bigger effort. We need to move faster. In terms of your question of how fast we can move, I mean, it's really up to us. I know that there's some debate and about how quickly we can get to 100%. Right. I know even some of the fiercest advocates would argue that we could get to say 80% by 2030, 2035, and then the last 20% is difficult for a number of different reasons. For example, we have a lot of nuclear energy, which is some people would not consider renewable. I mean, I'm right. Just for the sake of this conversation, agnostic on that question, but just to point that to portray the situation. Do we do carbon capture? How feasible is that actually? So I think that's a question, but I think we can certainly get there to pretty quickly if we make massive investments in solar and wind in particular, and in battery storage. And right now, we're not making them. I mean, we have to make them, but we're.
Yep. Let me just pause for a moment. I think our state representative, Elizabeth Fiedler, is here. Elizabeth, you were here with us?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Let me turn the camera on.
Oh, that's so great. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Apologies that I couldn't be there for the first half. I know you were in phenomenally good hands with my friend and colleague, Senator Saval, and just really glad to be here with you.
I had a notion the two of you knew each other.
We've met, yeah.
Well, let me introduce you properly. Elizabeth Fiedler is a second-term state representative from the 184th District in Central City in South Philly. Her voice is well known to Philadelphians, as she served for a full decade as a news reporter for WHYY, the region's national public radio news station. The daughter of two public school teachers, she is parenting two young children while holding office, as is the senator. So the two of you have that in common as well. Running for office in a pandemic with young kids, that's a trick. So Elizabeth, if we just, the senator gave us an opening statement. Are there some initial thoughts that you haven't heard, unfortunately, what we've been talking about the last 30 minutes, but just some initial thoughts on what about the Green New Deal is attractive to you and what you think it does for Pennsylvania and Philadelphia?
Definitely. So first, thank you to everyone who's organized this, and thank you for having me. Thank you to the senator for sharing this virtual stage with me. It's a real honor to be here with you. The Green New Deal helps us to tackle so many of the interconnected problems that we face. We know that coming out of this pandemic, one of the biggest things that we need, and I know the senator hears it, I hear it from people, from friends, neighbors, constituents, jobs, and not just the sort of job where, you know, you're going to need a second job or you'll wonder if you can get by, but real family sustaining jobs that have, you know, the power of a union behind them, that pay family sustaining wages, that include comprehensive health care, things like that, that actually respect, treat people with dignity and respect that they deserve in their employment. So that to me is a huge part of it, but right alongside of it is the fact that we have to change something about what we're doing. You mentioned I have 2 little kids, and one of the reasons that I was a little bit late tonight is actually it's my now 4-year-old's birthday. So I had a birthday party that I was very firmly
Happy
committed
birthday.
to. Yeah, thank you. So I think a lot about the world, not just that we're leaving to our kids, but what we're already seeing, right? I think that for a lot of, at least I'll just speak for myself, a lot of my life, we've been looking at, well, when this happens, right? And looking at scientific projections and predictions of things and seeing early indicators of climate change, of impact on trees and wildlife and things like that. And now we are very clearly seeing things happen right here in Pennsylvania, in the state that I've spent my whole life in, care very deeply about. I remember hearing a testifier who came in to speak to, I think it was the Appropriations Committee, who from either DEP or DCNR, who talked about just the impact on the trees of Pennsylvania. And I think that that's something that can feel, you know, we talk about the human impact, we talk about climate refugees, we talk about the impact of loss of human life. These are all obviously incredibly important and at the very top of the reasons that we need to be fighting. For some reason, I'll be honest, that the description that this person from the state gave about the change in trees and the fact that so much of our agricultural system would be left almost unrecognizable if we continued on our current path, you know, just the impact on dairy production, on trees, something so simple as the fall foliage that so many people enjoy, you know, just as tourists or just, you know, kind of take in, and you spend a little bit of time in nature and relax.
It's true. Fall will be less colorful. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be gone. And I think there's just so much that so many people have been waiting for and saying, oh, well, hopefully we won't reach that terrible projection. And now it's clear that it is here and it has been here.
Right.
So yeah, I think, you know, the urgency of it and the fact that it is impossible to look away from it, even if one tried,
Right.
to me would be the part, like I said, right along with employment. We have to do it. And also it's valuable to do it. We join with our labor partners and our community members and neighbors, and it's beneficial to everyone.
Well, let me turn to some of the questions coming to you from chat to both of you, but Senator, I think this is for you. It predates the state representative joining us. Black women are 70% of Philadelphia yearly evictions. How are you going to focus the dollars and solutions to these most impacted people? You had mentioned housing earlier.
Absolutely. So one, I just want to say happy birthday to Lewis. This is like I'm just shocked that he's 4 years old. And we don't need Elizabeth. Anyway, I know him since he was a little baby. So anyway, happy birthday to Elizabeth's son. So one, and Rep Feedler would have, you know, as much if not more to say on this than myself. Because we're both committed to halting the eviction crisis and what is frankly going and no less the utility crisis. The moratorium on utility payments has ended, and people are starting to have their gas and utilities. I mean, other utilities just shut off.
So she wants dollars and solutions. So
yeah,
help her
so
out.
we can. So the biggest thing that we can, one of the bigger things that we can do is make investments in the housing infrastructure itself, and this connects exactly to the Green New Deal. So, for example, just that. So one, it's just we have an aging housing stock in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania, and it disproportionately affects low-income homeowners and residents, Black and Brown homeowners and residents in particular. 75% of low to moderate income homeowners who sought home improvement loans from traditional financial institutions in the last few years were denied. 235,000 homes in Philadelphia have leaks, 90,000 have cracks in the walls or floors, 77,000 have inadequate heating. I mentioned before that people spend on average 6% of their incomes on utilities, but low income people, 23%. A lot of these are ultimately the source, or at least a partial source, of why people lose their homes or are unable to, or suffer from displacement. But this is an environmental crisis, I think, as well as a crisis of historic inequality, racial inequality. If people are given, say, the means to weatherize their homes, there are programs in Pennsylvania. There is a need but the need is, we're nowhere near meeting the need and nowhere near meeting the capacity in terms of doing the work. Rep. Feedler mentioned jobs. I mean, so this is a jobs crisis as well. We could be putting people to work, weatherizing and supporting energy efficiency for the homes of low-income people, fixing those leaks, changing the heating, fixing the cracks in walls. I mean, this is work throughout our city that would actually make it easier for people to stay in their homes. We also absolutely need, eviction protections to reinstate the moratorium against evictions. Rep. Feedler has a bill on sealing eviction records for people who have been faced with an eviction and have actually not been evicted, but nonetheless have a record against them. Makes it harder to find their housing. So all of that is part of the solution. But I would,
Representative Fiedler, anything you want to add to that?
Would you mind asking the question again? The senator gave such a comprehensive answer. I want to see if there's any piece of it that I could add on to that would be
Black
helpful.
women are 70% of yearly evictions. How are you going to focus dollars and solutions to these most impacted people?
So we do, there are various financial relief programs that largely have come out of the pandemic, though not entirely. So I know that that's something that the senator really led on, and we were glad to do work in the House to try to make those programs better, to try to make them more, I was going to say user friendly, more usable at all, right? I was actually part of a House Policy Committee hearing yesterday that I co-hosted with Rep. Rick Krajewski, and he and I hold in the House the Eviction Expungement or record sealing bill that the senator mentioned, and we had a housing hearing yesterday. And something that came up multiple times that I think was really valuable to remember was that when someone is facing something so traumatic as an eviction or a threat of eviction, they are not able to sit there and remember a phone number that they were advised to call in a tenants' rights class that they may have attended 3 or 6 or 9 months earlier. And so the guests that we had, including some people who had these experiences firsthand, were really talking about the need to be constantly providing these sorts of services and make them actually accessible. And I think that I think politicians throw around the word accessible a lot. So I'm hesitant to say it, but I do mean accessible, like in the true meaning of the word, right? So that, somebody who is, parenting 2 young kids and also working 1 or 2 jobs and also taking care of their mom is able to access that information, and it's a program that actually makes sense for them and has a timeline that allows governments to spend the money and make adjustments as needed. So I think so that's one piece of it. Also, eviction expungement is a bill that we have that would allow a person, if they have had an eviction filed against them and they were found not at fault, to have their records sealed. Right now, if you have an eviction filed against you, pretty much travels with you for your whole life. Doesn't matter if you were found at fault, doesn't matter if you were evicted, doesn't matter. Anything that you did after that was filed to try to, kind of make peace or make agreements with the landlord is still there following you and makes it harder every single time that you try to find housing. And doesn't really benefit anybody. Doesn't benefit landlords, doesn't benefit anyone. So I think that there are legislative solutions like that, but I do think that the senator really hones in on something that's incredibly important, which is we have a real lack of housing that's actually affordable in the city of Philadelphia, in my district here in South Philly, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so I think the real answer, and what ties in with the Green New Deal piece of this, is we need to be really serious about investing major dollars in housing, affordable housing that is high quality housing, that is, a beautiful, safe, comfortable, community and human focused place to live.
We step to a new question. Training would be needed to reduce environmental issues in our school district. Can we train graduating students to remediate the schools they graduated from? How about that as a concept for either of you?
But Feedler, I think you should speak to this. You're leading on this effort, or at least on school.
That would be great. Yeah, thank you. So I was also on a panel, a DSA panel the other night with Senator Vincent Hughes, who, in addition to Senator Saval in the Senate, has really just been pushing on this since before either of us arrived in Harrisburg, to be quite honest. And he was talking about the fact that, we have the money to do things like that. We have the money to remediate our schools. We have the money to create a robust job training program that invests in recent high school graduates, returning citizens, people whose field of employment may be reducing and they're looking to change jobs. We have a $3 billion budget surplus in Harrisburg and $7.3 billion from the feds. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of money. I think money that most of our colleagues didn't would have been hard pressed to even imagine, a year or 2 or 3 years ago. And so I think it's just really incumbent upon those of us, especially in the state level, to push for that money to be well spent. I think that it is a great idea. I think building even more robust partnerships with labor unions and other like technical training, adding more VOTech and tech training programs is something that I'm really interested in doing, especially here at the 2 high schools that we have in our district. It's something I've heard from a lot of people who remember, when they were growing up, that it was a viable option to be able to go to your local school and get that kind of training. Earlier today, I was actually at I was at IBEW, and they had a whole virtual reality segment where they talked about basically like 21st century apprenticeships, and you put on these giant goggles. Like I had only ever done VR once. I didn't really know what I was in for. You put these huge goggles on and like suddenly you're there on the rooftop of this very tall building, like trying to rewire something. I mean, it's just, there's huge potential, I guess I would say, to be able to train so many people for these kinds of jobs. So that's a long way of saying yes. Right. Senator?
Yeah, you want to add to it, Senator?
Oh no, I mean, I just want to, highlight. I agree with everything Rep. Feedler said, and it is, but I think it is an educational project. I think that a Green New Deal for schools, on which Rep. Fiedler and Senator Hughes have some legislation. Likewise, I neglected to say for dollars and cents, for the problem. On the housing issue, we're proposing in the Senate using $150 million of the ARP funds for the kind of weatherization projects. I mean, it's only the beginning of this sort of work that we need to do, but it's a project that if we were to do this with our schools and our housing, it would really transform. Everyone would be involved in it. If you're involved in, if your school is going to be transformed, it would be a project that our students and our teachers and our communities would be so deeply involved in, because in the sense that they already are in our schools, but it's obviously an educational initiative as well. Right. In addition, but yeah, I think there is a lot of potential.
Thank you both. Molly says that we've mentioned that there was some bipartisan effort on environmental and renewable topics. What ideas, projects, or legislation have the best likelihood of getting passed in the legislature, and what will be the hardest points to reach agreement on?
So what I was referring to is there is some, I would say this, that the clean energy people recognize, I mean, I don't think they recognize quite enough, but that the largest share of energy jobs are actually in clean energy in Pennsylvania. 90,000 jobs in clean energy as opposed to some 40,000 in traditional sort of fossil fuel extraction, and that's growing. Whereas the jobs in fracking and the others are not to the same degree, or in fact are shrinking in certain industry sectors. So under that rubric, people recognize people are tied in with different interests. There can be closer to certain industries than others. So there is some effort, for example, to clean up existing fossil fuel production through carbon capture and sequestration. which I think I have some skepticism towards. It's a hugely expensive and largely untested phenomenon, whereas renewable energy is cheap, actually, comparatively. I would also say that, but there is some interest in getting there. They just want to keep those industries whole, I would say. But one place where I feel like there is potential unanimity, and I've heard it, across from the building trades, from some of my more conservative colleagues, is in this, in housing and like things like energy efficiency in homes, I think in particular, because people across our state, they have housing, they're having a housing crisis as well. They have an aging housing stock. They and likewise have toxic schools in their districts, et cetera. None of us want that. And so to the extent that we can focus on these things these crises, frankly, that we share across our state, I think that that's where, at least in the near term, there's some potential unanimity. And I think as there's more funding and money that comes through both in our state and federally for renewable energy, and as that industry starts to grow, that will also start to change the picture for a number of our colleagues who are more resistant at the moment.
Representative Feedler, do you see bipartisan support on any of this?
I think I agree with what Senator Saval said, and then I think that there's sort of glimmers of hope, I would say, that I have been thinking a lot about. One in particular is a really cool project that's focused more on the western side of the state, Reimagine Appalachia. It's not a bill per se, but it's an incredible partnership, I think, that has brought together labor, environmental groups, community groups, and it's really designed to, it's really blunt, to be honest. That's one of the things that I appreciate about it. It says, we've got a lot of people who work in extractive industries. We're seeing the job market, we're seeing the economy, we know which way that's going. We need to make sure that we are helping train them and make sure that they're moving into jobs that are comparable to the positions that they had before, that are beneficial in building the kind of world that we want. And in many ways, that is right in line with the Green New Deal. That's work in transportation systems and a civilian conservation corps and energy efficiency. And that's really bipartisan. I mean, we had a gentleman from one of the unions in central Pennsylvania who is on a Blue-Green Caucus call with us, who has been integral to this project, who talked about the fact that he's got members on both sides and they think it's really cool. They see themselves in this project. And so I do have hope. I think that we've got some tough math when it comes to the makeup of the House, and especially the House, but the House and the Senate. But I do think that there is hope that we can do something on this front.
It's a tough state because you've got a state where the first oil well was dug here. Coal is huge in this state, where the epicenter of fracking. So to get away from the extractive industries and switch to renewable energy, it's so important, but it's a huge hurdle for so much of the state.
Well, and the names of the extractive industries are even etched on the ceiling of the State House floor. I remember just a week or two into when I got there looking up and realizing that, oil and gas are literally etched into the ceiling. So as you said, they're, kind of fundamental pieces of Pennsylvania's history and current.
Another question we have, what are the bills in the pipeline to help push electric vehicles and infrastructure for charging stations?
Well, so actually, this is an excellent instance of there being bipartisan legislation on this front. So in the Senate, there is legislation that Senator Bob Mensch is a Republican has introduced, and we've been working with him on some amendments to it. Basically so it is to create electric vehicle infrastructure across the state, but also to ensure, that we want to ensure that there's equity in that. And this is part of the Green New Deal. We don't want it to just be in, so people recognize that electric vehicles are sort of new. I mean, a lot of car companies are moving in that direction. So there's that sense of recognition is taking place. So people want to be proactive about it, regardless of party affiliation. And what we've been working on is trying to ensure that some of that the proceeds that come from these charging stations, which the utilities will benefit from, would also be, some percentage of them would be invested in public transit, would be, we would ensure that some of these charging stations are also directed towards environmental justice communities or communities that are disadvantaged otherwise. So I would say that there is a bill. I couldn't tell you the bill number right off the top of my head, but it's Senator Mensch has introduced it, and I can try to find it to ensure that people know about it and track its progress. And Elizabeth, Rep. Feedler, we got to get it through the House if it gets out of the Senate. So I think we'll talk about it.
One overlay I want to add is that Ford just introduced an electric version of the F-150, which is like the best-selling vehicle in the United States. And if Ford can sell electric trucks, for me, that's a game changer. And it feels like the industry is finally moving ahead of we're going to have to catch up to them, which is really great. That's extraordinary.
No, it's good. I mean, I think it's a real, we've seen companies actually fight electric cars and electrification
for years. Yeah,
for years. And so this is a very valuable change. I just will say, that we still, we need comparable investments or much more in our transit infrastructure. We will face some, just even regardless of kind of the bracketing the Green New Deal for a second, we'll just face a shortfalls in Septa and other transit systems.
Right. So Septa is a key player in the Green New Deal, and so is So Septa has to. Well, you actually have some specific platform items about what you want Septa to do for the Green New Deal.
Well, I think we need more equity in our transit system. I think that we should be moving overall to a fare free system in due course. Just to increase access to transit. We need some more, regional rail reform, I think, to actually change it, move away from a kind of suburban commuter model to one in which the regional rail is more like the rest of our L and Broad Street line, decarbonize the system, move electrification of buses, school buses, I think in particular. That would also, that's something we're starting to see across the country, because we connect, asthma rates and things like that to what the kinds of transit that children are taking. So those are some of the proposals that I think that advocates have sought.
Representative Feedler, thoughts on Septa and mass transit?
I second what Senator Saval said. Sorry, my attention was caught by a question in the chat. No, yeah. I have nothing else to add. I do think that we're seeing a lot of major car manufacturers and vehicle manufacturers. You mentioned the F-150, but there's also a lot of either new vehicles, hybrids, minivans, things that are coming up, that I think, right. I have to say, I hear parents talk about them when I'm at the playground. It seems like it has permeated to a level that previously people would say, oh, did you know, my second cousin got an e-vehicle, and then everyone talks about it like it's this rare thing that oh my gosh. And now it feels like, as more options become available and hopefully the price point comes down, we will see it, the popularity increase. We've already seen in the House a number of bills, either from Republicans or with both sponsors being Republican and a Democrat, so bipartisan from the start. I think it's something that's obviously going to happen. I just hope that we can build the infrastructure for it and also have a more robust bus and subway system, which I prefer to take. So,
Molly offers that one of the historic criticisms of the environmental movement is that it has been largely a movement by and for white people. How do we ensure that Black, Indigenous, and people of color citizens have both a hand in shaping policy and accrue their share of environmental benefit? I think we've woven some of that threads through this conversation already, but Representative Fiedler, you want to start with that?
Definitely, and thank you for that question. I think that there are models that are trying to do this in a much better way right from the start. So I mentioned Reimagine Appalachia. They have this as environmental justice and coming from the community much more directly than I think a lot of sort of outside proposals have in the past. And I do think also viewing these things as much more interconnected than maybe the environmental movement or many environmentalists did 10, 20, 30 years ago is valuable, right? All of these things are interconnected. People, Black and brown communities are more likely to have polluted water, polluted air, have facilities and production facilities put in right in their neighborhoods that will do these things to their communities, more likely to have toxic schools. So I think not turning away from the racial justice part of it is vital, and not being afraid to talk about it, which I think is something that I take a lot of motivation, honestly, from some of the very youngest folks who, I mean, young age-wise, not young like wisdom-wise, because I think that in some ways they are leading the way, both in Pennsylvania and nationally, some of the organizations.
Agreed. Senator Saval, thoughts you want to add to this piece of the conversation?
I agree with Rep. Feedler. I mean, I think that we're actually going, partly through Black, Indigenous, and people of color, just forcing the conversation and forcing the changes in the organizing. Recognizing both, I think the historic contributions of people of color to the work. I mean, Indigenous activists will often say that we've always had green jobs. I mean, as water protectors, and for example, which I think is totally apt. And then also, recognizing that all these inequalities are bound up with each other. I mean, I know that, with the schools conversation, obviously you see that in Philadelphia, and as that the inequality, the environmental crisis at the heart of our schools is a crisis of racial inequity as well. I mean, and this is, I mean, you can't talk about them as separately. Housing is the same, but the other thing is that we need, if there are benefits to be reaped from the industries, I mean, that the proceeds and the profits from these industries, some portion of them should go in infrastructure proposals, national as well as state, should go towards historically disadvantaged communities. And for example, I mean, I ran on a proposal to devote, to create a climate equity fund that would devote 40% of these proceeds to historically marginalized communities, Black and brown communities in our state and our city. And I think that's partly because of the organizing that has been done to change the picture. It still needs to change, especially I would say around clean energy and like the kind of energy industry. That level of conversation tends to be an extremely white conversation, a very upper middle or middle class conversation. I think it needs to change. But yeah.
And the one small piece I would add to this is that the environmental movement is painfully aware that it needs to do more outreach to people of color. And they've been working really hard at that, but there's, of course, work to be done. Some notes on housekeeping. Senator, you have a hard stop at 8 o'clock. State Representative, could you stay for 5 minutes more past the hour?
Sure, I'd be glad.
Great. Senator Saval, is there some last statements you want to offer on your way out? What should we do next? What would you like us to learn? How would you like us to move ahead?
Well, actually, I offer a very specific thought because I see the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative has come up, which is a significant and important kind of cap on carbon emissions. But one of the things that we should think about that it does offer is it brings revenue into the state through the cap and trade system. I mean, in a way, the model is not like the Green New Deal, but what it does bring us is the opportunity to make the kind of investments in our communities that need it the most, in our housing, in our infrastructure, and things like that, and to remedy these fundamental inequalities. So as we look to that initiative, I hope we can look to the possibility of using that money to transform what we've done, and look to as Rep. Feedler said, we have the resources, we have the investment, we have the capacity. We just have to use it. We need organizing to do it. And so I hope, and I know that everyone on this call, I know that you will be a part of this movement. I'm excited to be fighting with Rep. Feedler on these fronts. And I look forward to more conversation about the Green New Deal and to enacting many of its components in our state.
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Thanks for hosting this. Thank you for these great questions.
You got it. Thank you. Have a great night. Representative Feedler, any thoughts you want to do the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the RGGI? So I know there's a lot, it's very controversial, and there's a lot of pushback about the state joining this regional initiative. So help us work that out.
So I serve in Harrisburg on the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. It is headed by Representative Daryl Metcalf, who some folks on this call may be familiar with. Serving on that committee for 2 years has been a wild ride and very eye-opening. People questioning whether climate change is real and things like that are they only need to turn to the facts and science to know the answers to. Recently, when we were in Harrisburg the last time, just a few weeks ago, one of the pieces of business we had was a letter that was supported by all of the Republicans in the committee that was sent to, I believe, sent to the Reggie board, asking them to refuse to accept Pennsylvania. This was something that as Democrats, except for one Democrat on the committee, we opposed, either voted no or abstained from voting because we didn't actually believe that the committee had any authority at all to send that sort of letter. So as you said, you know, it's in some ways controversial, but much of the controversy falls along party lines. And quite honestly, I question how much of it is actually a rejection of Reggie and how much of it is more of a reaction to, say, Governor Wolf or something like that, for example. But yeah, I am hopeful, I'm optimistic. I don't think that it is the ultimate solution to all of our problems, but as the senator said, I think it's a valuable step as we seek to, you know, work toward a Green New Deal and toward an economy that actually, you know, values human beings and our planet and doesn't, you know, allow, honestly, like corporations to make tremendous profits at the expense of both people and our planet.
Next question is there any universal basic income in the Green New Deal? If not, where would you see UBI fit into the bill? Universal basic income.
So I think UBI is a great idea. I actually have a piece of legislation, a state UBI with Representative Summer Lee from Allegheny County. I think that in particular, as we transition from the current economy, which in many ways is not sustainable for a lot of people, and move hopefully toward what we do want to see federally and state and city-wise, a lot of people are going to need additional support and assistance, right? I would say, just speaking for myself, my ultimate economic goal is that everybody has enough money to live, and not just to live, but to enjoy life and to not have to worry about paying for their bills or whether they can, you know, on a Saturday, take their kids out for dinner or ice cream. I mean, I believe that we all deserve to be able to not just survive, but to, you know, have the roses part of it too. So I think that whether that comes in the form of UBI ultimately, or we're elevating the payment structure for jobs themselves, I think it could come either way. But I think that ultimately we need to raise the wages that we pay people, and we need to include healthcare for every person as a human right. So
this national spotlight is going to be shining brightly on Pennsylvania next year because we have both a governor and a senator up for re-election, up for election. Do you see climate change or the Green New Deal playing any noticeable role in the conversation around either of those two offices? You would think those would be central to both.
Right.
Curious. I was, especially as you're thinking, I was struck by the presidential campaign of, you know, recently, and the Democrats were debating the nuances of climate change policy while there was essentially silence on the Republican side. And that's, frankly, that's not a sustainable solution for the country if one party ignores a problem, the other party, you know, gets to deal with it themselves. So I'm curious what you think is going to happen with those two, with governor and senator.
I think it's a great question. So I've lived in Pennsylvania almost my entire life. And during my time as a reporter, covered a lot of politics and remember a number of presidential elections fairly recently before I was a state rep where, you know, this is going to be the last time when Pennsylvania is going to be in play. We're not going to be purple anymore. We're not going to be, you know, discussed as much in national politics. So that's sort of on my mind. That is not going to happen. I think that when it comes to both the US Senate and the gubernatorial races, trying to think for just a moment and not give you a canned answer. I would say I actually feel like it's incumbent upon people and organizations such as yourself, elected officials like myself and Senator Saval, to push for that to be part of the conversation. I would follow along during some of the presidential debates on Twitter and see, people, I don't know if you saw this, but they would be counting how far into the debate until there was a question about climate change, or about anything at all related to the Green New Deal, which should really be part of every question. I think whether they call it the Green New Deal in that question or not is not of a particular significance to me, but they need to be talking about the issues. So I do think certainly when it comes to the U.S. Senate race, I expect that it will be, absolutely. In the gubernatorial, I really think it depends on what people demand to have answers to and push on and make a top priority. And that's me being totally honest, not trying to avoid the question. I think it could go either way. I think it can feel challenging to a lot of elected officials to talk about, but we have to talk about it. And we have to push elected officials to be accountable for the things that they say that they're going to do. And that's not a dig at anyone. I just think that that's kind of the way that it works. People will only talk about some of the most challenging things if we push them to.
So thank you for staying a little bit later, and let me offer you the same thought that I offered to Senator Saval. So what would you like us to know moving forward, to do moving forward, pay attention to moving forward, to help with the Green New Deal, at least to understand it and keep the conversation alive in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania?
Attention is often given at the city level, as it should be, in particular to city government and city elected officials. But as you saw, Senator Saval and I, along with a number of our other colleagues, are very passionate about this. We do have the capacity to do a lot of things in the state level, whether it's bipartisan legislation or through the executive branch. And so, I would just encourage people to stay involved and stay in contact with your state lawmakers and to keep pushing on the state front, because we can make a lot of changes, and it may not be called a Green New Deal, or it may not look exactly in the way that we're thinking it might on the federal level, but there are huge and really valuable investments to be made in affordable housing and school improvement and toxic school remediation and energy efficiency and public transit. And that's what makes me really excited and want to keep doing this job, is how much work we have to do and the belief that we can accomplish it.
That's great. Well, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for coming to us on your son's birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you. And anybody, feel free to unmute yourself and thank the state representative for joining us tonight.